So we have, I get the great opportunity to interview two very distinguished gentlemen here. I know most of you know them. Richard was the 71st Secretary of the Navy, Rhodes Scholar, Yale Law School graduate, and clerked for Justice, Supreme Court Justice Byron White. And DA, of course, Dean Emeritus Johns Hopkins, Presidential Medal of Freedom, 17 honorary degrees, and then that thing about smallpox. If anybody here needs an introduction on either of these two people, you're probably in the wrong room, so check your schedule. They are speaking today on behalf of themselves, not any of the centers they represent or work at or whatever. We're just having a discussion here like we'd have sitting in a coffee house or a bar, and y'all are welcome to listen in. But we're going to discuss several different issues, and the first question I have is for Richard. How are we doing, Richard?
Well, first off, let me say that I'm really grateful to all of you for being here in UPMC. I had some wonders about why anybody would want me to supplement DA's views in this panel. But I got two hints in the course of the lunch, which I just want to observe. One was the serving of a decadent dessert. And the second was Randy's question to Gene, which I thought was well answered. You really need a second opinion, even if they're kooks, and I'm delighted to be the second person on this panel. With respect to the article that you mentioned, Randy, a paper I did with jointly with Pam Burkowski for JAMA, I think the progress we've made, not just in the Department of Defense, but generally, has been significant, but clearly inadequate to the problem. If we had a major biological attack, say a kilo of anthrax dispersed in a reasonably efficient way, either in a civilian context or against a military target like a port, I think we'd find that our capabilities for dealing with it were inadequate to the task. So I'm glad we got started we got started. I think we have made real progress, but measured against the nature of the challenge, we're still quite far away from where we should be.
Thank you. DA, I was also reading your recent article that you published last month. And you were talking about what it was like being at HHS during the time period that Gene was talking about, and some of the concerns. And then in your article, you were questioning how much progress had really been made. One of the things that I found very interesting about, can we answer some fundamental questions? If there were this, say, kilogram of dry powdered anthrax released in a major city, do we really know what to tell the American people right now? You said, do you get on the subway or don't you? Do you what do you do? Explain a little bit more what you had in your article here.
Well, I think some of the most anxiety-provoking moments occurred right after 9/11. As I was called in by the Secretary and asked to be of some help. At that time, right after 9/11, 5 days later, it was a Sunday evening, and he informed me and his senior staff at that point that there were intelligence intercepts which suggested there was going to be a second attack and it was likely to be biological. At that time, our center was very new. It was about 3 years old. CDC was finally adding some people specific to the area of biodefense. There was very little research going on anywhere. And certainly the cities and counties were totally unprepared to do anything of a major sort. It was really other than what FEMA had been able to induce with regard to emergency response. And the question that bothered me from that point on was, and which I think we probably ask each other daily, what do we do if tomorrow the shoe drops? Well, then we did have anthrax was released. And you saw brief bits that Gene showed from Secretary Thompson and his concern and being unsure but reassuring. And but then we got, it was quite clear with the New York cases that we had anthrax and it was an attack. at that point, what do we do? And we could predict from the turbulence that was already about us that there was going to be chaos. And the country was already really having a lot of trouble, and white powders were being found everywhere. People were being evacuated from buildings. They were being taken out in the back lot and hosed down, and really a strange set of circumstances. I think powders were being found everywhere. Powdered sugar was being tested along with everything else. But the one question that we ask ourselves, what do we do if tomorrow we have an attack? What do we advise that be done, and how do we handle it? Well, it's quite clear that if we're going to do anything, that those at the operating level, states and cities, have got to be fully informed as to what the strategy is and what might be done. And we have to have some decision at the national level and some agreement as to what it is we want to do. It's 10 years since we've had anthrax, the anthrax attack. And just to illustrate what some of the questions are. The question is, do we evacuate the city, or do we tell everybody to shelter in place? But for how long? The anthrax falls on the ground. It's not destroyed. It's there. And what do we say? There are three different views on this. One, shelter in place. Other is to evacuate. And the third is it probably isn't significant or a significant risk. And we don't have the data to back this up. And then just to conclude, really, we hoped at one point we'd have a vaccine that would be a recombinant anthrax vaccine, which could be widely utilized. And that was 10 years ago. And we don't have a vaccine that is the one we have now requires 7 doses of vaccine to protect. And what do we do about antibiotics? And how widely do we use these? It's recommended they be given for 60 days. But what do we do? People get sick just from the antibiotics. What we need is a plan. And I think we all have to, there has to be a buying into what it is we're going to do. Other than that, we're going to have all sorts of different experts offering all sorts of different advice, and I think chaos.
EPA's annual budget to do that research is 50% of what the budget is for Marine Corps marching bands. You'll hear Senator Talent talk to you later this afternoon about priorities and how we all know the fiscal environment we're headed into, but this is an issue of priorities. As the former Secretary of the Navy, I got to say I love Marine Corps marching bands, but when I look at those priorities and the long-term security for my kids and grandkids, I worry about that. Even if you tripled EPA's budget, it would still round off to zero in many programs in DOD.
I would put other things first, like Army marching bands, but...
Oh, yeah. They need help, right? And DA, so you talk about when you talk about plans in your articles, now maybe it's just my perception, I got the idea you were talking about a federal plan or a national plan. Richard's talking about we should test this, and he's written about this quite a bit, about let's test it in 1 or 2 cities and get it right, which is more somewhat of a military approach. You develop the doctrine and everything, and then other people can learn from it instead of trying to do everything at once across the country. What's your opinion of that approach?
Well, I don't think we're ever going to have answers. We're going to be doing research, and there are always more questions, and the research could be profitably inform us as we move ahead. But I think one has to pick a time like right now. What are we going to do on the best knowledge we have? We've got to have a plan, and we will not know the answers to it. The big problem we have trying to get that decision made is something I would call interagency committee-itis, which I think is virtually epidemic and spreading. So that I think the idea of trying to get some sort of decision and really plan and framework is not easy, and yet it's going to have to, we're going to have to come to that, and we really, if we have something happen tomorrow, we've got to have answers, and I think Gene Meserve has made it quite clear. They're going to look for answers, they're going to look for statements, and if we're not in a position to provide some sort of valid information and advice as to what we believe should be done based on what, I think it's going to be chaos.
Well, communications is one of the things I had on my list here, DA. And, you know, Gene made a good point about if government officials telling us, and then you have another government official saying, and of course our concern is federal official, state official, local official saying different things. It bothers me. In this page 2 of the Washington Post yesterday, there was an article that said 1 of 10 families in America don't get childhood vaccines for their children on the schedule that's recommended. 1 in 10 families. After we had enough H1N1 vaccine in 2009, only 38% of Americans got it. I'm concerned if they're hearing conflicting things about, and particularly, how about if we had a medical countermeasure that was approved under the emergency use authorization? Didn't even have full FDA approval. But yet we thought, with the nature of the event, what can we do to improve our communications capability? I think CDC has done a far better job, we saw in H1N1, of having the system to get out information. But the information that's got to flow through those pipelines, you know, we're going to develop all these medical countermeasures at great expense, but if people aren't going to take them, how are we going to deal with that, DA? I mean, you had to convince a lot of people to get smallpox vaccines one time, right? And it was a pretty dangerous vaccine,
Sure
actually.
did. Well, yeah, I think the thing of it is, I think you've got to decide on what is the best, our best judgment as to what the steps are to be taken. And there's going to be disagreement, but somehow or other, I think there's got to be some sort of authoritative kind of approach to this. And that is needed, and it's needed now, not with research going on for 5 or 10 years, but it may inform research that may modify what's there. But I think this is one part of the problem. There's a second problem. Recommendation right now from CDC, what do you do with an anthrax attack? Well, you want to give a vaccine at 0, 15, and 30 days, and begin everybody who might have been exposed on an antibiotic for 60 days. Can you imagine any city in America that's prepared today to vaccinate all or a substantial part of its citizens once, let alone 3 times? Is it possible? Do we have any city in America that's really prepared now to make an antibiotic available efficiently throughout the whole of a city very quickly? No, we don't have either of these. We're still waffling around trying to come up with an answer. What I worry about is what I worried about right after 9/11. Suppose something happens tomorrow, what are we going to do? And the penalty for doing nothing is going to be chaos.